Adam Thompson joins us, legal expert out of New York City-based attorney Adam Thompson is here. Adam, how you doing today?
Doing great. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good. I'm assuming most people have seen Donnie Brasco, or at the very least, we understand the notion of putting a police officer, an FBI agent, whoever, in deep cover, and that from time to time you have to witness low-level crimes so that you can sort of establish your bones, your credibility. So now you are not representing anyone in this case so far. Is that correct?
I'm not representing anybody so far in this case, but I can tell you, you're right on the money. And Donnie Brasco is a great example. I was just discussing this case with somebody else, and I brought up that case. Because everyone's familiar with that movie. He had to witness, horrific events that took place, and without blowing his cover, you have to sometimes let minor crimes slide by you without blowing your cover in hopes of getting the big fish later on down the line. And I think that answers one of the other questions you raised before I came on, where you were saying, is this a group that just casually gets together, just rides down the West Side Highway sometimes? And I think the answer to that has to be, no, this has to be some solidified group that has a base with a lot of members, because you wouldn't be assigning undercover officers to just a randomly group of people that get together casually on weekends. So if there's undercovers that are assigned to infiltrate a group or become part of the group in hopes of getting information from them, you could definitely assume then that this group is organized and has a lot of membership. And, they're trying to get some big fish out of all of this by having them in this capacity. So
does it seem likely that that's going to be his defense? And I guess if that is, of all people who would understand, if that was valid, that, hey, I was just confirming my undercover status, why wouldn't NYPD have defended that?
Well, I don't think that is the case. And I'm troubled by it for a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, it took days before he even came out. If he was there and part of the group and observing what they do and participating in their organized events, then the minute something happened of this nature, where the people's lives were at stake and the injuries were very possible, because, we all saw the tape, we all know what happened. Certainly he, while in deep cover, he could have remotely made some kind of call on 911 and, covered it up by saying he was calling a friend or doing something else, and no one really would have been the wiser. But he didn't take any action. So first of all, when it happened, he did nothing to do or bring aid to the people that were in trouble. Secondly, he waited 3 to 4 days before he even acknowledged that he was there and part of this. That on its face raises a lot of eyebrows and makes you take everything he's going to say with a grain of salt, because he immediately should have been responding minutes after this happened. So when you couple those two things together, you get to the point we are now, which we now find out in the video, that he wasn't just there, he wasn't just present, he didn't just witness it, now he's a participant. And when he's a participant, it's crossing the line. Again, going back to Donnie Brasco, it's one thing to be present when criminal acts are going on, you don't blow your cover because you don't get involved. It's a different thing to now actively become part of those criminal actions. No one said he had to jump in. He could have just remained on his bike and stayed in the background while, all hell was breaking loose. And like I said, could have probably called 911 and said he was, videotaping it on his phone, whatever cover he would have used. But to then actively become part of it, where he's smashing out a window, and I'm sure that the child that was in the car and the wife were all in the back seat, he exposed some people to some very serious grave injuries potentially. That kind of action is definitely going to amp everybody up and escalate the situation. So it just made matters much worse. So I think he went really way beyond what even you would do in a role as an undercover, and he's going to have to answer for that.
Adam Thompson's a New York criminal defense attorney. He's our guest. Yeah, I mean, because ultimately I want people to understand where I stand on this is, if an undercover cop is in the back of the room when one dirtbag whacks another dirtbag, then he just takes notes, shoots video, and adds that to the indictment. And I'm not going to shed a tear for the dirtbag whacking another dirtbag. But when a citizen there's an attempted murder by beatdown by motorcycle helmet on a citizen, and you're just standing by, I have a problem with that. And yeah, you jump in, then you're no longer an undercover cop. You're just a dirtbag biker. What I'm afeared of is that he's gonna have a psychologist or a psychiatrist saying that you don't understand, Counselor Thompson. people of the jury, my client was so deep in cover, he thought he was one of these men. Doesn't that sound like something you're going to hear a year from now when this guy's on trial?
Well, I could tell you, being a criminal defense attorney for 25 years, you try to put the person in the position that a jury can relate to. Because if a jury can't relate to what you're going to claim as a defense, you have no hope or prayer of winning at all. So the only thing is people are going to see a video of this. And the immediate reaction of almost everybody that's going to see this video is just like you expressed yourself. You know, if it's a bunch of what you want to label them dirtbags or however you want to classify them, doing this to each other, it's one thing. But when a private citizen who's innocent and harmless gets involved in the picture, at what point does the undercover have to then say, you know, I can't permit these people to get harmed and intercede? And if he was interceding and his cover was really good, they would just think he's one of the groups saying, hey, lay back, let's end this. We don't need to go this far. And maybe it wouldn't raise suspicions. But ultimately, when they go to trial, they're going to try to get the jury to identify with this guy in some way, shape, or form. And once you see that video, it's kind of hard because you're going to see who you think is a biker doing these horrific acts to this innocent family, and then you're going to find out that's an undercover. And when it becomes clear to everybody that he didn't have to go to that extreme or that level, he could have sat back. You know, the first obvious question is, you didn't have to do that. You could just stayed on your bike. Who said you had to be one of the few guys? Because there isn't a lot of people that got involved to that level. Why were you one of the few guys out of dozens or hundreds of bikers that were doing this ride? Why were you one of them that went and broke the window and got involved to that level?
Yeah, never mind getting in character. What about the other 90 bikers that actually were part of this bike association who did not participate? They chased the guy, but they didn't break the windows and all that. Now, John Miller, former deputy commissioner with the New York PD, said on CBS this morning, he said, quote, there's something else here. He's an undercover from the intelligence division. Those undercovers are involved in deep penetrations, terrorist cases, organized crime groups. There's probably a case that may have a year or 2 or 2 years, who knows how long, invested in it, where this person's at the center, where the bad guys just looked up and said, hey, we haven't seen that guy. Where is he? Anyway, they're laying the groundwork for some reason that if this guy was involved and he was actually there as part of his duty undercover in that motorcycle gang, then it must have been some really huge deal, and that now that entire investigation is all blown.
Well, here's the thing that's curious then. Based on his actions that day, why did it have to get blown? You know, who released that he was an undercover cop that was there? They could have kept that under wraps if it was that important and the operation was that big. I mean, that's basically something that got leaked. The next thing we knew, there was an undercover or more than one undercover there, and some of them might have been involved. They didn't have to disclose that if there was really a serious, big, ongoing investigation. Let me tell you the real reason why they're making that statement. The reason they're making that statement, it always comes down to liability, money, and lawsuits. And the city is afraid after everybody catches wind of this video and sees what this undercover did and that it could have been avoided and he didn't have to get involved at all, they're worried that there's going to be a multi-million-dollar lawsuit filed against the city and against the New York City Police Department. And as employees, this guy's going to be, you know, held, and the city's going to end up having to pay a huge amount of damages for what happened to these people.
Now, they're not worried. It's a guarantee. Right? I mean, this is a lock that this is a slam dunk lawsuit. And I'm not sure. You tell me, in civil court in New York, is it like the rest of America where you don't need to be 12-0? You need to be 7-5.
It does not have to be unanimous. It's only for criminal cases.
Okay.
Usually you impanel a jury of 6 in New York, for example, for a civil case, and the jury could come back with a 5-1 vote. Sometimes they'll make it a larger jury panel. It could be as many as 12, like in a criminal case, and they may just make it, you know, where it has to be 10-2 or even 9-3. So it's done many different ways. And I as sure as we're speaking right now, if they don't have an attorney right now, as an attorney practicing for 25 years and handling a lot of these kind of cases, I would jump at the opportunity to represent this family against the city in this case, because I think that the training and how these the police officers and how these kind of things even happen can all be avoided. And I just think it's disgusting that it just perpetuates itself and continues over and over and over, and we don't see a change of this kind of conduct. It just is a continuing thing.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that video and I see a guy who was just a bad guy who happened to gravitate towards undercover work for the NYPD, and maybe someday he was effective, but he there's a thin line between controlled violence and uncontrolled violence, and I didn't see that line. The guy was uncontrolled. He was out of control. He was not in character. And, you hold the department responsible.
You touched on a great point. You're the average jury person. If I was conducting a trial, you're the person that would come into the jury box to hear this case. Once you see that video, really, where's your mind going to take you from that point forward? No matter what kind of spin they try to put on this, you're going to have sympathy for that family in that car. You're not going to think what they did was unreasonable. They keep saying they ran over one of the bikers, they did this because they feared for their life. Their vehicle was surrounded and basically converged upon by several different bikers who were, perpetrating violent acts against them. As a father with a 3.5-year-old son, if my wife and my son were in the car when that happened, I don't think anybody would say it would be unreasonable to do the same thing that he did. And once a jury gets to that point, two things happen. That guy's going to get convicted of criminal charges in court, and then there's going to be a big lawsuit as a result of that conviction that follows against the city and the NYPD.
All right, Adam Thompson, criminal defense attorney in New York. Thank you so much for joining us on America Now. Hey,
always a pleasure, Brian.
All right, Adam, we'll be back in just a minute. Brian Toot filling in for Andy Dean, back on America Now right after this.